guys, so a lot of you have been asking how do we write questions on vouching, verification and of course special audits. So here is a video. This video is exclusively going to cover up and give you some tips on how do you answer this question on vouching, verification and special audits. Now the very fact that you've constantly seen questions from vouching and verification come for 16 marks, you have 4 marks question on each and you have 4 questions coming up, and then there are a lot of those questions in vouching and verification which you actually want to try and memorize so that you can get these. But here I am, let me give you some of the ways how you can have some common points with respect to these questions, so that, because at the end of the day it is all boiling down to your one day before the exam and how do you revise all of it. So let's go with that, and then I will move to discussion on special audits. How do we also answer special audit questions on, like the audit of hotel, cinema hall, etc. Right, going on with it, first things I want you to quickly understand what vouching and verification questions look like. Let's start with vouching in the first place. Now when we talk about vouching, vouching is a term that is used for both expenses as well as incomes, right? Now you're going to vouch these. So basically every receipt or every expenditure, this happens only after a proper approval. There needs to be an internal control for anything that comes in and goes out. So if you look at every answer, now by now I'm pretty sure that you all would have already covered one round of reading. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that if you observe very carefully, you have certain points, like at least around 7 to 8 points, which are common in almost all the answers. Now I am also going to give you a series of 10 or 11 common points which you might want to kind of remember and keep them as a grip. Because now see, for example, let me start, like say for instance we are picking up expenses like traveling expenses, and then we also have something like advertising expenses. Now traveling expenses and advertising expenses, you will not have all the points exactly the same as to what is to be vouched, but points like internal control, its authorization, tracing the entry both in nominal account and the cash book, these are going to remain same, because at the end of the day they are all expenses. So does the case with receipts. So, and then whether they are incurred in the interest of business, did we enter into a contract. So we have a set of common points that bind us in these kind of answers. So let me first give you a set of common points for vouching, and then we move to verification. So the first place we are talking about common points for the answers where we are talking about vouching. So how do you vouch or verify when they ask you, and if the question is about vouching, you're going to go in with these common points. First and foremost thing, you're talking about authorization of the transaction. Authorization of the transaction, and 2, internal control, because these 2 points, they are not going to go anywhere, because those are the 2 beginning points in any answer. Every transaction that has happened that you are going to vouch, it has to be done after proper authorization, and of course proper internal control should be surrounding the transactions. Then moving up next to point number 3. Now one of the important questions whenever we are talking about any vouching transaction, we just have to identify the nature of the transaction. Nature of transaction. Now because see, when you are vouching a transaction, it could be a capital purchase of an asset, right, or it could be a revenue expenditure, it could be anything, right. So identify the nature of the transaction, and as a matter of fact, whenever you identify the nature of the transaction, we have 2 things to worry here. Which are the 2 accounts that are getting affected? So as a matter of fact, in the next point, you have to find out the 2 or more accounts, 2 or more accounts affected. What are the 2 or more accounts that are affected because of this? So these 4 you will be able to write in almost all the answers. So is the 5th point actually, tracing the relevant entry. Trace the relevant entry. Trace the relevant entry in cash book or bank statement. Now till here these 5 points are common in almost all the answers, because see, at the end of the day when you are vouching any transaction, you are going to vouch these points only. Now I want also to be very clear that see, some points you are writing based on your understanding of what that expenditure is. So, it may not suit up in all the cases exactly, but these 5 points are very common. Now, from here on, point number 6. Now, that is why I am making generalized points here. These are not, you should not just write the point what I write as it is. Then you are not going to get any marks, right? So, these are your, what do you say? These are your points to remember. So that, now like say point number 6 is write about supporting documents. What are supporting documents? Whatever are relevant in this particular case. Like for example, if I am talking about travelling expenses, it will be tickets. If I am talking about advertising expenses, then it will be the advertising contract. If I am talking about any other expenditure, what are the relevant supporting documents to that particular expenditure? So is the case with receipt also. Understood? What are the main supporting documents for that? And then most number of times when you are vouching transactions which are relating to a third party, whoever is involved, you are supposed to obtain external confirmation. Now please don't write this as a general point in all the answers. Some places it may not warrant an external confirmation, and when it is not warranting an external confirmation, you don't want to write this point. But otherwise, generally you can quote the reference of standard number 505 and tell that you might want to bring up an take an external confirmation directly from the party with whom the transaction has actually happened. And then one of those common things with vouching for both receipts and payment is about performing analytical procedures. Performing analytical review procedures. Now, why are you expected to perform analytical review procedures here? Right, and this is guided by standard number 520. See, please understand for both expenditure and as well as receipts, we are trying to do analytical review procedures to understand the pattern, right? What is the pattern in which they are spending now? Now, say travelling expenses. Last year you sent so much travelling expenses. Current year there is an increase in the travel expenses. So, I hope you know what an analytical review procedure is about, studying the ratios and trends so that it gets you to identify the patterns with which it is going. And this point number 9 is I consider to be one of the most important points. What is point number 9 talking about? You should, after talking about this, write if there is any compliance with law or any regulation or any accounting standard. Now, why do I say this point is very important? Because for example, now like say you purchased an asset, then you should simply make a point saying check the compliance with accounting standard number 10. Then if the question asked is vouch the payment to directors remuneration, so then definitely you have provisions with respect to Companies Act. So check the compliance with the Companies Act 2013. So whichever law or regulation is applicable to that particular standard, right? So whichever it is, then based on that. Now like say your question is on retirement benefits, check compliance with AS 15, check compliance with AS 10, check compliance with AS so and so. So why are you writing that? So you are telling that apart from doing the vouching of the transaction, it is more important for you to cross check whether it is within the ambit of law or accounting standards. Very important thing. So these points almost make it up to every answer except for external confirmations, where if needed we are doing it, otherwise not. And so is the case. If any law or regulation is applicable, you write, otherwise exclusively you don't have to search these points and write down. And then all the expenses whichever are incurred, right, whether they are in the interest of business, right? Now like say director went on a personal travel, those expenses should not be booked into the company expenses and say that is all director expenses, so that will all be included. No. So whether the business, whatever transaction has happened, is it in the interest of business? Now you are making an advertisement payment, but that is not meant for this business, you meant for some other business. So then that should not be booked here. It is very important to see whether every expenditure incurred, right, for all the expenditure incurred, you have to see whether that is in the interest of the business, and make sure that there is proper disclosure in balance sheet or P&L, wherever it is, right, whether it is properly disclosed in the balance sheet and P&L. It's very important for us to catch up with all these points. Now these are the 11 common points that you can see for writing a vouching answer. Now which in any case you will be comfortable in writing 8 to 9 points in almost all the answers. Now there exactly comes your presence of mind in the exam. See, now if it is not necessary to write this point called external commission, don't write it. If you think that it's not relevant, write the point of interest in business, don't write it, right? So make sure, but see, authorization, internal control, nature of the transaction, supporting documents, so at least 8 points out of this 11 are definitely going to come in almost all the answers. So keeping this in mind, you will be talking about every answer on how to vouch a particular expenditure or revenue. Moving next on to the other side, I am going to talk about verification here. Verification is a term used for assets. Okay, verification is for assets and liabilities. What are the common points that you are going to look for verification? So is the case verification, every purchase of asset. So I am going to talk about verification of assets. So will be the same time similar terms for liabilities also. But verification of assets, what are the points that you are supposed to check? Existence, ownership, possession and valuation. These are the things that you have to compulsorily check when you are verifying the asset. But when you keep that, how do I check existence? Go on to physical verification. But now when the asset is an intangible asset, you might not write that point called physical verification. So I am going to give you a series of points again like this, where majority of those points apply, and then also have to have a presence of mind to know what to write and what not to write. Let's start with the first 2 points that always said. Do you have the authorization to buy the asset? Authorization. 2. Whether there is proper internal control in buying or selling the asset, whether there is a proper internal control, only after that did it happen. Now comes the most important point. How do you know the list of assets, or how do you know that these are the list of liabilities? It's important to take that from the management. So it's a very, very important point. The third one, don't forget to write this. Obtain a schedule. Obtain a schedule of assets, or the list of it. Now let's say for instance plant and machinery. What all have gone into plant and machinery? I would like to take a schedule and check that, right? So obtain a schedule of all the assets, and once you do that, now start checking. Check the title. Check the title. Title should belong to the company. How do you check? Maybe like see FD receipt, it should be in the name of the company, or title deed for property or documents and all that. Check, it should be in the name of the company. Check whether the asset belongs to the company or not. So will be the case of liability. Check the rights and obligations. Rights is a term for asset, obligation is a term for liability. Whether that liability is something that we have to pay off, is it our liability or not? So this is something that we need to check here also. Check the title. So for like FD receipts, title deeds, whatever other. Now invoices also could be there. Now like say if you purchase a fixed asset, maybe like a printer or any computing equipment for that matter. So you just have to see whether these are taken care of in that. Then moving up, the next point that we are looking at here is one of those common points, like how the 5 point here is also important. This will come in all the answers, right? Tracing the entry in cash book or bank book, irrespective of anything. So is the case for every fixed asset, right? Every fixed asset, check whether depreciation has been charged. Now replace this word depreciation with amortization if it's an intangible asset. Understood? It should be depreciation or amortization depending on what it is. Check whether depreciation has been charged or check whether amortization has been done on that. Okay? Till here all these points are meant for the assets. Moving next, we talk about the method of valuation, be it for asset or liability. Method of valuation is a very important thing, because like I said, valuation is one of the primary assertions to be checked. And then moving next will be what? Physical verification. Physical verification. Now in bracket I want you to write wherever applicable. Whenever you are noting these points, make sure that it is wherever applicable. I want you to be very clear about this. See, not all assets there is a possibility of doing physical verification, understood? So, it is important for you to understand where can be physical verification done. Now, intangible assets, you cannot write this point. So, be very alert about this particular point, physical verification. Then, moving up next, now some of the assets, they have a floating charge, like for plant and machinery. Debenture holders have a floating charge on plant and machinery. Debenture holders may have a floating charge on land and buildings. So, it is very important whenever you are doing verification of assets as an auditor, it is important to see, check whether any charge, has been created. Check whether any charge has been created. You can pull out what do you call as the register of charges, and we can go by that. Okay, getting that? Then again coming up, same 9 point here, compliance with law, regulation or accounting standard. Compliance with law, regulation or accounting standard, necessarily whatever are there that you are supposed to see. Then sometimes for verification of assets or any asset or liability valuation, you involve an expert because you might not know how to evaluate. So, if there is any expert opinion on valuation, again if any. And the last point here once again you need to understand is about external confirmations. External confirmation. This is for things like debtors, right? Debtors and cash at bank. For those things you can take a direct confirmation. So, what you are trying to understand here in terms of both vouching for assets and liabilities, right, will be these points. Now, like I said once again, you should not by heart these points, go and write them, all of them straight away without making any sense. No, you should not do that, right? These are common points. Use your presence of mind to understand how you will be making sure to use these points to fit in every answer. Now, 1 or 2 points here and there might be right there, which you need to write. So, here debtors and cash at bank. So, external confirmation is a very important thing. So, here it again you can mention SA 505. Okay, expert opinion, that is also something which is optional. Now, like say for instance, stand number 620 says do you really want to do that? Depreciation is also. So, considering the facts of these points, you should frame a decent. Your question is for 4 marks. So, as long as you are able to write 10 points, which are actually the ones that an auditor would go for vouching or verifying, I think it makes sense, right? So, yeah, there are a lot of questions, and again, by simply by hearting this, try and write the answer may not be the ultimate solution. So, what I suggest you at the end of the day is, yeah, take all your questions, run through all of them once. You should know what are unique points. So, in each one you will have one unique point, like say in advertising expenses, you will have contract, the word entering into a contract with the advertising agency. Directors remuneration, you will have Companies Act particular point. Talk about traveling expenses, you will have about tickets and the travel policy of the company. So, in every point that we discussed, there is one particular point which is peculiar, which you are not supposed to miss. So, keeping this as the base, yeah, this will help you a lot to not miss the major points, because none of these points you write in the answer will be wrong, but at the same time all the time they may not suffice. That is where I want you to stay a little focused and catch up with those. So, this is vouching and verification. Alright, I think that helps for now, and then let me move on to the last part of this discussion. A lot of people have asked questions on how do we go by writing answers to special audits. Now, see, please understand, special audit question, sometimes you get one question, sometimes you end up getting 2 questions, right? They are asking you questions on audit of a cinema hall, audit of a hospital, audit of a club. So, I always suggest this answers go by 5 parts. How do you do as an auditor? How do you verify this? So, I always start with a set of preliminary points which you have to verify in almost all special audits. What are the 5 points under preliminary? First, you need to check the legal status of the organization. Now, whichever you are verifying, whichever audit it is, the hospital or cinema hall. What is it? Legal status. Is it a proprietor, partnership firm, company? What is it? Check the legal status. Once you check the legal status, examine the guiding document. What guiding document will you examine? It could be MOA, AOA, trust deed, could be anything. So check all these. Now, by doing these things, you will understand who your client is and what are their basic fundamental principles, right? Understand the legal status, examine the guiding document. Then evaluate the system of, what you do is to evaluate the system of internal controls. Whatever system they have for their internal control, try to obtain an understanding of the internal control system. Review the minutes of meeting, what key decisions they took, all will be discussed in the minutes of the meeting. Then 5, understand the accounting policies, understand the accounting policies and review accounting records. Now let the question be on any audit. These 5 points are going to be there as it is, as part of it. Understood? They will be there for film, the cinema hall, they will be there for hospital, they will be there for educational institution, charitable institution. Let it be any nature. These 5 preliminary points have to be there, part 1. Then the next heading that you put up is what? Now the 2 things that we need to not forget is receipts and payments. Now, because these are the only varying factors in every answer, receipts and payments. Now, for example, talk about an educational institution, fee from students, that is the main receipt for them. Cinema hall, sale of tickets, hotel by room rent. So, like that, what are their main receipts? The first and foremost thing in receipts, try to split it in 3, right? What is their 3? First receipt will be main income. What is their main income? You will write about that. Then any ancillary income attached to this and in other points. So is the case with payments. Major, right? What are the major payment? Now like say for instance, you are talking about an educational institution. It will be what? Rent, water, electricity, other things. Major payments. Or staff, payments to the staff, faculty and all that. Talk about a cinema hall. Right, payment to the distributor, payment for advertising, like that every special audit that you undertake will have a, see in the very nature of that business itself, you will get to know what are their main receipts and payments. So go by that, major payments and all other ancillary payments. Now, once you write this, you are almost covering every factor with respect to the basics that you start doing the audit with, the receipts and payments. And then you have to always conclude the answer with assets and liabilities. Assets, liabilities. How do you check the assets? How do you check the liabilities? Now here you can generally make some common point, like say for assets you can again check the title, existence, ownership, valuation, all that, along with depreciation and all that. 3-4 points on assets, how do you check them? So is the case with liabilities, whether the liability is an obligation on the company, how will it arise? Now like say creditors is a general thing. So like that, which liability comes in, and what you need to be aware and awake is like in all these special cases, did anybody put a case on that particular body? Now like say for instance in hospitals, apart from writing about assets and liabilities, one important point is there about contingent liabilities, that if somebody's, somebody put a case on the hospital saying that because of their negligence only the patient died. So that could prove to be a contingent liability. So apart from writing assets and liabilities, stay sharp to write such points. Again, every special audit has some peculiar point. Now like say for instance, you need to write wherever these special bodies have to pay GST. Somebody might have to pay other taxes as well. So what are those? Figure out what those body is and how it is, kind of making sure that all these points are covered. As an auditor, that is your duty to break the answer into 5 paragraphs, so preliminary, and inside that 5 points of compulsory. Then receipts, 3 parts of the receipts, 2 parts of the payment, major and others, and of course assets and liabilities. Now if you have a better way to answer, always go with it, because generally some students tend to write 16 to 18 points in flat. Of course you are covering all these, but you generally write 16 to 18 points all in the audit. sometimes proves to be a little clumsy. So in order to avoid that situation, what I do is always to break them into this kind of point. So those are your common points of vouching, for verification, and this is how you go with special audit, right? I hope the video was informative, helpful, and take a screenshot of whatever the 3 parts are, and of course the revise the maximum number of times, and which is what will help you in scoring great marks, right? I wish you all the best. I will see you in another video with something else. Thank you.